There's a specific kind of disappointment that happens in late summer when a gardener bites into a tomato they grew themselves. One they watered, staked, fed, worried about for 4 months. And it tastes like absolutely nothing, watery and pale and vaguely tomato adjacent, and the ones at the supermarket somehow taste better, which feels deeply wrong and slightly personal. And the frustrating part is that most gardeners assume the problem is the variety, or the weather, or just bad luck, and they're almost never right about any of those things, because the real reason a homegrown tomato disappoints has almost nothing to do with what's happening above the soil and almost everything to do with what's being fed to the roots and when. The timing of what a tomato plant receives through its growing season determines not just how many fruits it sets and whether they crack or drop, but whether those fruits develop the sugars, acids, and volatile compounds that make a tomato taste like something worth eating. And most home gardeners are feeding on a schedule that works against all three of those things simultaneously without realizing it. So this is the feeding timeline. What tomatoes actually need, at each stage, and why getting it wrong at any one point costs you either the harvest or the flavor or both. The first stage runs from transplant to the appearance of the first flower cluster, and this is the stage most gardeners get completely backwards, because the instinct when putting a young tomato plant in the ground is to feed it immediately and generously, to give it the best possible start, and what that usually means in practice is reaching for a high nitrogen fertilizer, the kind that produces fast, lush, dark green growth, and applying it right at the beginning of the season when the plant looks small and vulnerable and in need of a boost. And the plant responds, visibly and enthusiastically, throwing out big dark leaves and thick stems and growing fast enough that it feels like exactly the right thing to do, and all of that growth is coming at a direct cost to what the plant should be doing at this stage, which is putting energy into root development rather than leaf production, because a tomato plant with a deep, extensive root system established before flowering begins is the foundation of everything that comes later: the fruit set, the size, the flavor, the ability to handle dry spells without stress. And a plant that was pushed into aggressive top growth early will have a shallower root system and spend the rest of the season trying to compensate for it. What works instead is a balanced or slightly phosphorus-forward feed at transplant, something that supports root establishment rather than leaf production, applied lightly and consistently rather than heavily at once, and then backing off on nitrogen specifically as the first flower clusters start to form, because excess nitrogen at flowering tells the plant to keep growing leaves instead of setting fruit, which is where the season starts to visibly go wrong for a lot of gardeners who can't figure out why their plants are enormous and beautiful and producing almost nothing. Second stage is flowering through fruit set, and this is the most consequential window in the entire season for both yield and flavor, and the mistake here is almost the opposite of the first stage. Where the first stage problem is overfeeding nitrogen, the second stage problem is often neglecting potassium and calcium entirely, and those two elements are what determine whether fruit sets successfully, whether it develops flavor compounds as it ripens, and whether the skin stays intact or splits the moment it gets heavy with water. Potassium is the flavor mineral in a tomato, not in a vague, general sense, but specifically because it drives the accumulation of sugars and acids inside the developing fruit, and a tomato grown in potassium-rich conditions tastes measurably more complex than the same variety grown in potassium-poor soil, and this is the actual explanation for why homegrown tomatoes disappoint so often, because most standard garden feeds are nitrogen-heavy and potassium-light, and the plant produces fruit that looks right but tastes thin. Calcium is the structural mineral. It's what keeps cell walls intact under pressure, and a tomato that's expanding rapidly with water but not receiving enough calcium to build strong cell walls is the tomato that splits down the side after a heavy rain, or develops blossom end rot at the base, or drops off the vine before it fully ripens. And the maddening thing about calcium deficiency is that it almost never comes from calcium actually being absent in the soil. It comes from inconsistent watering that prevents the plant from absorbing the calcium that's already there, which is why calcium problems and watering problems look identical from the outside and get misdiagnosed constantly. A soil pH meter is worth having at this stage specifically, not because pH is complicated, but because calcium availability drops significantly in acidic soil, and knowing whether the bed is sitting at the right pH before assuming the plant has a calcium deficiency saves a season of treating the wrong problem, and the one linked in the description is what gets used here because it reads both pH and moisture in the same probe, which at this point in the season is the combination that matters most. What to feed at this stage? A low nitrogen, high potassium feed applied every 10 to 14 days through flowering and early fruit development, with consistent watering on a schedule rather than irregular heavy drinks, and if the soil is known to be low in calcium, a light top dressing of gypite or crushed eggshells worked into the surface around the plant adds calcium without affecting pH the way lime does. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The third stage is fruit development through to ripening, and this is the stage where most gardeners either stop feeding entirely because the fruits are already there and it feels like the work is done, or they keep feeding the same thing they were feeding at stage 2 without adjusting, and both approaches cost flavor in the final fruit. As tomatoes move from green to color break, the point where the skin just starts to show the first blush of orange or red, the plant's needs shift again, and what it wants at this point is a reduction in overall feeding combined with a specific increase in potassium relative to everything else, because the ripening process is driven by potassium availability, and a tomato that has plenty of it at this stage concentrates sugars faster, colors more evenly, and develops the aromatic volatile compounds that are the difference between a tomato that smells like a tomato when you pick it and one that smells like nothing at all. Reducing watering slightly at this stage, not stressing the plant, but pulling back from the generous watering of mid-season, is the other piece of this, because a tomato that's slightly less hydrated in its final ripening stage concentrates its sugars and flavor compounds more intensely than one that's receiving full water right up to harvest, and this is the technique that market gardeners and serious growers use to produce tomatoes with exceptional flavor from varieties that perform only averagely under standard conditions. The combination of high potassium feeding and slightly reduced water in the final ripening stage is the single biggest flavor intervention available to a home gardener, and it costs nothing beyond adjusting what was already being done, and the difference in a side-by-side tasting between a tomato managed this way and one that wasn't is significant enough that most people who try it once never go back to full-season uniform feeding and watering again. A reliable moisture meter at this stage takes the guesswork out of the watering reduction, because the goal is consistency at a slightly lower level, not drought stress, and without a way to read what the soil is actually holding, it's easy to either underwater and crack the fruit or overwater and dilute the flavor, and the one linked below reads soil moisture accurately enough at root depth to make that calibration straightforward rather than approximate. The full picture looks like this: phosphorus forward at transplant to build roots, nitrogen backed off as flowers form, potassium and calcium through flowering and fruit set with consistent watering, then elevated potassium and slightly reduced water through ripening, and following that sequence from one end of the season to the other produces a plant that sets more fruit, loses less of it to cracking and drop, and delivers flavor at harvest that makes the whole season feel worth it. None of it is complicated, and none of it requires expensive inputs or a precise scientific approach. It requires paying attention to what stage the plant is in and adjusting what it receives accordingly, which is a different relationship with a tomato plant than most gardeners have been taught to have, where the approach is one product, one schedule, applied uniformly from planting to harvest regardless of what the plant is actually doing at any given moment. That relationship, paying attention to the stage rather than the calendar, is what this channel is built around, and if that's the kind of gardening you're interested in, subscribing makes sense because that's the territory this stays in. And if you've had the watery, tasteless tomato experience and figured out what was causing it in your own garden, the comments are exactly the right place for that, because those specific, local, hard-won observations are the most useful thing in gardening, and they belong in the conversation.